everyone, welcome to this panel where we'll be exploring how to unlock business value from AI investment. This discussion is sponsored by Lenovo, whose recent research projecting a significant increase in AI spending this year prompted today's discussion. I'm your host, Laura Bithell, Senior Commercial Content Editor at Raconteur, and I'm delighted to be joined by 5 leaders in this area to discuss the AI trends driving business success, how businesses can overcome challenges in AI implementation, and the evolving role of the tech leader. So before I dive in, I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves briefly. Claire, perhaps I'll come to you first.
Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Walsh. I'm the Director of Education at the Institute of Analytics. We are a global professional membership body for the data and business analytics professions.
Great, and perhaps Greg's next.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Greg Smith. I'm the Executive Director and General Manager of Lenovo's EMEA Solutions and Services Group.
Johan, perhaps you can come to you next.
Hello, and pleased to meet you all. I'm Johan Hus. I'm Vice President of Digital Products and Services at Sandvik Cormant. We are a manufacturing company where we also are in the business we serve.
And Matt?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Matt Unakes. I'm the Senior Director and lead our business development for AMD's Client Business Unit.
Great, and finally, last but not least, Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Williams. I'm the CTO of Pleo, which is the leading spend management solution in Europe. And I'm also the chair of the Lead Dev Conference, which is a management leadership conference for technologists.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much all for joining. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So I think to start off, I'd like to come to you first, Greg. So as I mentioned, Lenovo's research has influenced some of our discussion points today. And, it found that AI spend is increasing. It also found that there's particularly high satisfaction with AI projects in EMEA. Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And this was Lenovo's second CIO survey into what we call AI-nomics. And we carried one out about 18 months ago, which gave us some great insights. And this one also has delivered fantastic insights that we find very, very useful when shaping our portfolio and offerings, plus also in our conversations with customers as well. So it incorporated over 600 CIOs across EMEA and also globally as well. Now, what we are seeing is, and as you rightly pointed out, that the take-up of AI projects and use cases is increasing. And last year, some figures that we saw was about 12% of organizations had implemented generative AI use cases. From the survey, we expect to see that growing to over 40% in 2025. So it's some considerable growth. And one of the things which is driving that growth is the change from experimentation into full implementation of use cases with generative AI. And when we look at some of the survey results, we see that organizations are now starting to see the benefits of AI-powered devices and solutions, really increasing productivity and internal and external customer experience. And it's that key point there that people now see the benefit. That means when we move from experimentation into implementation, there is a reason to do it. And that reason is built on the fact that it's actually delivering against the expectations, which is driving that higher satisfaction level. And one of the key points that we saw behind it, as well as actually that in EMEA, and EMEA specifically, organizations are strategically aligning the AI investments with business plans and business values. And I'm hoping that some of the customers here that resonates with, and those who it doesn't resonate with, that actually see that this is one of the ways forward. So yeah, some really, really interesting findings which came out of the survey, Laura.
Mm-hmm. Does that kind of resonate with the rest of you on this panel in terms of, looking at real business outcomes now?
Yeah, we see very similar things. I mean, I think the findings from the survey from Lenovo are very consistent with what we find when we talk to customers. And what we're seeing, I think Greg's point around the transition from experimentation into implementation is a very important point here. This whole generative AI space, when you really think about it, is still very nascent. It's really been in the last 12 to 18 months where the broader industry has started to see this as a really big trend, and businesses have been rapidly scrambling to try to catch up and get their heads wrapped around it. And what we're seeing is that in different industries, there are more and more use cases where businesses are now seeing value here. So, for example, in financial services, you could think about fraud detection types of plays. We see targeted applications and use cases in healthcare, design automation and engineering, various different use cases. But what we are seeing is that businesses who have invested early and gone and deployed experiments early are now starting to see benefits. And as they see those benefits and as their employee base is increasingly learning how to use these tools, and that's an important point, the employees have to learn how to use these tools and businesses have to learn how to deploy them. We are seeing that the momentum is continuing to build.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, we've been talking about lots of different trends here, and, you touched on generative AI there. There's also been lots of talk about AI developments like agentic AI, AI as a service. Perhaps, Claire, you're in a position to see how lots of businesses are responding to new technology. What kind of trends are you seeing?
I think what you've just said is very much what we're observing across the profession, that people are settling down into new roles and specializing more. So we do have our analysts who are more confident modeling with more traditional statistical or machine learning models. We do have people who are using agent solutions and are more confident being large language model engineers and deploying those kinds of solutions to novel problems. And then we have obviously the automation. And so where we see companies being more successful, it's where they've got a very clear idea of the benefits of each of these approaches, the benefits of having something that's been trained on public data that perhaps doesn't have the awareness of context but can solve persistent problems like health and safety issues, or how do we improve quality? And they also still have in their tool belt these more traditional tools that will tell us, what do our customers want? What do they need before they even know it? And that would come from more traditional modeling. And so with this large range of options available to them, they're more likely to hit on something that actually either generates new income, or resilience is a key word we're hearing, protects the income that they have from emerging threats, or perhaps it allows them to move into new sectors with a tried and tested product. So yes, I think what we're seeing is what you're saying, that we've got so many options now. People are finding the ones that create solutions for them.
In the beginning, everybody was trying to, Gen AI was a hammer looking for a nail. Everybody was trying to use it for absolutely everything. And we've had to give some guidance that, frankly, traditional ML is better at some of these things. It's very costly and not necessarily the best solution to just reach for Gen AI every time. And so that's one of the things I'm finding in my business, is that need to give that guidance and to make sure that people are using the right things for the right problems.
And I think when we start to see some really good use cases of Gen AI, and they are starting to emerge, then that inspires people. So if you can actually get a machine to look over a photograph of a construction site and spot the health and safety issues, people start thinking, oh, I could do that with this situation that's got parallels to it. And I think, yeah, we're getting to a better place.
We are a part of the manufacturing industry, and I think we're looking at this from three different angles. Basically, one is how can AI and technologies similar to that help improving our manufacturing process? How can we drive efficiency? How can we lower the manufacturing costs? How can we improve the level of automation in our production plants, which is it's been going on for quite some time, but we see a clear acceleration of that. But then we also, of course, want to, how can we use those technologies for our, call it office workers? Anything from drive, conclusions and how to help, our sales force as an example. So we see those early implementations, but they are fairly easy wins, and we see a fairly high return on investment on those engagements. But then lastly, and also I think importantly, this gives us an opportunity to serve our customers in a better way. So we have sort of 3 ways of adopting those technologies in a slightly different fashion, but how can we serve our customers better? Can we help our customers get the result quicker? So all those 3 areas are important, but they're also using, I would almost say, different phases of the AI sort of boom or technology, where of course generative AI is an important part of particularly the latter 2 ones.
It's good to hear this feedback as well, and it really does reinforce the messages that we're hearing from the CIO survey. And if I think about where we were 18 months ago, a lot of the discussions I was having around customers was a different discussion. It was, how do we stop failing fast? How do we actually find a way to monetize, make Gen AI successful? And it would appear from the evidence from the surveys that by a large extent, we've got over that hurdle now. And a lot of organizations understand that there's a lot of use cases out there now which you can actually start to align them to your organization, whereas before there weren't that many use cases and everybody was caught up in the hype cycle that we've got to have AI. But to your point, Mary, I've got a hammer here, I'm looking for a nail. And now we're not there. We see a lot of intelligent decisions made aligned to organizations' businesses and their business outcomes that AI and Gen AI can actually solve and provide huge benefits for, in terms of productivity, customer experience, security, and just financial risk management. So it's amazing how this has moved so much in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, as you say, Greg, it's really amazing how much it's moved on and how much we're talking about it more tangibly than we were maybe before. In terms of, obviously, there's the software, there's hardware. Are we going to see kind of AI baked into more, devices and things that people are using going forwards? And will that make a big difference to how, businesses operate?
It is, yes. And if you look at, and again, Matt will be very familiar with this kind of data. If you look at the uptake of AI PCs and the expected uptake of AI PCs, is that, and again, some great data we got from the CIO survey, only 1% of people who were surveyed said they're not considering using AI PCs. And AI PC really is, I would suggest, it's the gateway to having a more successful implementation of Gen AI, and it's the bit which touches everybody. Whereas before, when you were talking about industrial processes, finance, etc., it doesn't touch everybody. But as soon as you put an AI PC in front of somebody and get people starting to use even things like Copilot, and just use Copilot correctly, or use ChatGPT correctly, rather than just asking it, what's the weather like in Guadalajara, is you can get a massive amount of benefit from this. And if you can again look at the statistics that the survey came out with, I was really quite shocked about this, is that 35% of those questions were either extensively using or piloting AI PCs. And that's a huge number given how embryonic really the AI PC industry is. And obviously has been #1 PC manufacturer in the world. Lenovo is exceptionally keen to understand how their Aurora brand is going to be taken up in businesses. And then we have 64% planning or considering how to use AI PC. So it's going to go big very, very quickly. And I think with that, we then start to get the critical mass of individuals understanding what AI, even at a generative aspect, can do for them, without even considering how it's used in their business as well. And that's where the real big gains are. So it's huge, Laura.
Yeah. And, Johan, Mary, Matt, kind of obviously your companies are rolling out some of these technologies. Would you count yourself in that 35% or 64% of companies that are looking at, how to sort of spread AI to everyone and make sure they're using it in their devices and their software and the hardware?
I mean, if I can quickly comment on that. So of course, I think that's a part of a natural evolution, because you also expect that to be, like any sort of, going from that, you mentioned that earlier, experimental sort of to more of a mainstream, then you also expect it to be stable, quick, snappy, all of those things. So I think the user experience is super, super important when adopting to broader audiences. And then all of those technologies will be important to underpin that experience.
Yeah, I think, from an AMD perspective, we very much take on a mentality of, hey, we're going to go try out our own solutions, right? And so whether it's the data center solutions or the AI PCs, we do a lot of deployment within AMD to go vet it out and really push the limits of that technology. But I think to Greg's point, really, really important point here is, if you think about the generative AI technologies and the solutions that are out there today, they are largely cloud-based solutions. And what we are seeing, that at least from where I sit, is just a tremendous amount of momentum right now around building out an ISV ecosystem, where more and more of the applications that run on a notebook or a desktop or a workstation are going to be taking advantage of these new AI PCs moving forward. So Greg talked about Copilot Plus, and obviously that's a big driver in the market. But that's it's a very important piece, but I'll call it a foundational piece. And I think what you're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months is this industry build on top of that, with applications that deliver better security, with applications that allow engineers and designers to design and simulate projects and designs faster. A lot of different use cases, and we're seeing a very, very rapid maturation of some of these applications that are going to be deployed on AI PCs. So, to Greg's point, I think he used the term, we're kind of embryonic in the current stage around AI PCs right now. Very much agree with that, and I think this next 12 to 18 months is going to be a very exciting time to see more and more of these use cases really come out to play.
And I mean, obviously, Claire, on your side, you're seeing a lot from lots of organizations. Is this kind of a trend you're seeing at all?
Yes, just listening to Greg and Matt talking, I think that it's a synchronicity because we have these technologies embedded in machines now that we use every day, so it's impossible to ignore them. It's right there in front of you, and at the same time, it's enabling our data scientists and our skilled technicians to do more and to do better. We've seen the gap between a highly skilled data scientist and a fairly junior data scientist narrowing, because they've got all of the support behind them to run Gen A code assistance as well. And so it's kind of a happy coincidence of lots of events coming together. I think companies without doubt understand this is not something that they can ignore. And that we see a flourishing of roles around data and data use, with new titles appearing every month at the moment, where companies are now getting the message that we have to embed it at every level. And I think because it's there in the PC, because it's there and it's unavoidable, we're all using it anyway with AI-empowered search, for example. Pretty much everybody's had a little bit of experience by this point and is exploring what else we can do, even those who are very reluctant to get on board with it.
There's obviously, a lot of potential for AI to transform business, but I think many, leaders and tech teams are still struggling with some aspect of adoption. We often hear this phrase around kind of AI is only as good as the data that powers it. So I wonder, just kind of question to the panel, I'll maybe pick someone first, what kind of challenges are we still seeing around managing data? Perhaps, Matt, if I come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think there's a handful of challenges that the industry and the ecosystem is working through. I think data is certainly one of the biggest ones, right? So I think the point you just made around the outputs and the results are only as good as the data that you feed into it. It's really important, right? I think when an organization or an IT leader is thinking about what they want to solve or what problem they want to address through using IT or using some of this AI technology, I should say, it's really important for them to understand the types of inputs and the data sets that they want to feed into that to help influence that decision. And then they have to understand how to train the models, how to train the applications. And I can't remember who said it just a minute ago, but somebody brought this up. I thought it was an excellent point, is we have to teach people and teams and organizations how to use these tools because they are new and it's a different way of thinking and it's a different way of structuring problems and it's a different way of using data. And that's not a trivial way to kind of reshape the way that people and teams think about how to solve problems. So to me, I think obviously the ecosystem is moving forward very quickly, and you saw that in the survey data that Greg outlined earlier. But there's still a lot of potential in front of us, and I think one of the biggest challenges that teams and IT leaders need to work through here is how to get the right data sets and how to train and enable their teams to utilize those to solve the problems that they're trying to go address.
I agree completely. I'd also add that, for an area like mine, fintech, we're dealing with very private and personal data, financial data, and that was actually, it had a chilling effect on us in the beginning because early on it wasn't possible to use ChatGPT and keep your own data out of the models and make sure that nothing got bled through and became part of the generalized model. That's obviously been solved now, but that privacy angle and security angle, I think, continues to be challenging and continues to be something that we need to focus on as we roll this out.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a particularly highly regulated industry, it's a big issue. I know, Johan, you also said that your industry, there's been a big conversation still going on around data management. What are some of the issues you're seeing there?
No, I can only agree that, the importance of the data, the structure of it, the access to it, the security, the privacy, as you said. But also, from our perspective and the industry perspective, there's a lot of legacy. How can we actually leverage that, and where do we actually store that, and how the entire access part, and before we can start realizing value with it, how do we even dig it up and find it and start combining it? So for us, it's also a very big part of this data management and data structuring that needs to happen, and I think this evolution now in the progress of AI sort of accelerates that need, but it's sort of we need to do that before we can go to even more advanced cases, because there is not the lack of data. It's actually how it's structured and how we can combine it that we see as the big challenges right now.
It's amazing, isn't it, that if we go back 30 years, we'd be having exactly the same conversation about data. In a different context, but exactly the same conversation is how do you ingest, how do you manage, how do you secure, how do you store, how do you access, and how do you structure your data? And I think a lot of the AI challenges may have been solved if the industry would have addressed data management with a lot more seriousness than we have up until this moment in time.
On the positive side, it works as a forcing function right now. So it may accelerate that or intensify that work.
Yeah, it puts a lot of spotlight on it at the moment, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like it's one of those things that just comes up over and over again, and it seems to be sorted. I suppose, obviously, as well as that kind of sort of tech and data side, and we've touched on it a little bit, but there's also the challenge of getting people on board and up to speed. And kind of on that piece in terms of ensuring customer and employee trust. When sort of rolling out AI initiatives, how can leaders ensure that everyone's on board? Greg, perhaps I'll come back to you again.
Yes, certainly. And for this, I'm going to call upon some discussions that I had with our own CIO. here at Lenovo, and he does a lot of work, a lot of speaking work, because Lenovo we have a lot of areas of interest and a lot of use for AI, and he's got a lot of experience. And he was doing some speaking events, and he said, there are 4 things you have to get right for a successful AI implementation. That's security. Mary, you'll understand that one, and everybody else. People, technology, and processes. And he said the biggest failure is in people. He said if you do not get people to come along on your journey and buy into your journey, your project will fail no matter how good the business case is. And as part of that, he looked then at the role of the CIO, because the CIO tends to be the person leading this effort if it's done correctly within an organization. And that CIO then has to become part HR, part facilitator, part conductor, and part technologist. And it is a phenomenal role that the CIO really now has to adopt. And I talked about this at another conference a little while ago as well, that actually what organizations tend to forget is that this is management of change. So when you deploy generative AI into the workforce to help increase productivity, satisfaction, etc., all those wonderful things, if management of change is not done correctly, and if it's not positioned correctly, it is doomed to failure. And this is, I think, why we saw 18 months ago a lot of organizations saying to us, how do we get from failing fast to successful implementation? And I saw some wonderfully technologically great innovations in organizations which failed. And they failed because the people that it was meant to help were not on side with it. And I will quote what I hear a lot is that the machines are coming for our jobs. And this perception may be a bit driven from media. When generative AI became really, really big news 18 months, 2 years ago, of course, there's a good story there. But at the same time, that perception is rife throughout the workforce. And that is the big item. You get that one right, and the organization will succeed in deploying what they want to deploy with AI. And it's all in mindset and behaviors.
What we are seeing is some very forward-thinking companies who are leading the way are starting to see the multiple opportunities of upskilling some of their business staff, for example. Because if you have some high-performing individuals, but there's no promotion available to them this year, you've got to do something with them to motivate them to stay and continue performing at their peak. And I think a lot of companies that we're speaking to now that are doing very well are beginning to offer training in digital and data skills as something to keep those people motivated and keep them on board while they wait for the opportunity. And I think where it's integrated a lot more into other business aims is where we're starting to see a more collaborative approach rather than a cooperative, not just I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, but let's work together and see how we can all achieve mutually beneficial goals from this.
Does that kind of collaborative approach more kind of resonate with anyone else in terms of, making sure that skills and talent are primed to kind of use AI and not feel kind of threatened by it?
Yeah, I think for an area like ours where we are heavily regulated, we need to keep a human in the loop. It's been a little easier to get that message across where we're not fully automating or fully handing things over to AI because we're literally just not allowed to, and so that's made it a little bit easier on us to do this kind of rollout. It's very obviously a assistant or a augmentation of humans rather than a replacement of humans. But I completely understand that's not the case for everybody, and it's obviously causing anxiety for a lot of people. The other thing that we found is, just as Claire says, providing training matters. We use a company called Skillawale that does very kind of small group coaching, live coding kind of training, and we're considering doing a whole program of work around Gen AI, because we don't want to be in the situation where all of the engineers who want to upskill have to do that all on their own time, because it's a bit of an unreasonable expectation, but it also just it exacerbates inequality if you have some people who've got much more responsibilities at home or caring and dependents and so on. You don't want them to be falling behind because you're not providing any time at work to upskill on these things. And so I think that's an important point as well, to make sure that we don't let certain groups fall behind by not helping them sufficiently, or even just giving them time to learn during business hours, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite a good, I guess, segue into our final section, which was kind of to look at the role of the tech leader. And I know this is something you slightly touched on, Greg, but you know, obviously a lot of that kind of making sure that people have the right training and that they're not being kind of forced to do stuff outside of their hours, and just making sure that it's kind of, I guess, equitable and everyone's kind of at the right level they need to be is kind of a big part of that. I think, Mary, it was you who was saying when we were speaking before about, you know, soft skills being a hugely important part of that. Do you have anything to add around there?
I think I find it funny that we call them soft skills because they're often the hardest skills to learn and to teach, right? I certainly went into leadership because computers were just too obedient. They do exactly what I tell them to do, and people were much harder. But I do think that in addition to the hard technical skills, we need to help people with influencing and communicating and making sure that they frame these things in the right way as well.
What about to everyone else in terms of kind of, I guess, the role of the tech leader? And you know, I mean, one of the phrases that kind of came out from Lenovo's research, Greg, was this empower of human potential, which I think is kind of what you were alluding to earlier with them being an HR leader and not just a, you know, person who's, you know, in the tech team.
So I can quickly comment on that. You know, from our perspective, and I mean, given where we are at, I mean, we are a product company, but there is also, innovation is close to our heart. Meaning that, you know, when we look at AI, there's a lot of enthusiasm. It's a lot of how should I say, you know, there is not a lack of ideas of things we want to do with this sort of technology. What are the possibilities? So I think also part of the leader role is to provide clarity and a clear direction, because obviously we cannot do everything, but how do we actually help the organization to prioritize? How can we show results? How can we show consistency? So there is a level of trust in both the strategy when it comes to technology and AI, but we also can demonstrate the results and the progress. So I think providing a confidence in that sort of process is key to us, to both drive the acceptance, but also for everyone to understand and how we help prioritize and drive those areas.
And I think the key thing for, you know, a CIO or a CTO in that space is they're not just a technology leader. They have to be part of the business leadership team. And that has been a very true statement for a long time at this point. But when you start looking at the levels of investment around AI solutions and what that means, there's more of a magnifying glass on that than there ever has been in the past. And so that CIO or that CTO needs to be very, very tightly integrated into the overall business strategy, using these tools and capabilities to solve the biggest problems for the business. And then, you know, Mary, back to your point around the soft skills, they have to be able to roll that out to the organization and provide the context, not just on what the team needs to do, but why they're doing it and how that's helping them achieve some of their strategic goals. So it really does put a lot of onus on the CIO or the tech leader to, you know, work all the way from the upstream, you know, big picture strategy, all the way through the kind of the soft skills and the deployment and rollout to the organization. So it's no easy task, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the things, I was really lucky. I spent the first 10 years of my career at Procter & Gamble, and it's obviously a great leadership environment there. But one of the things that they taught us was, as technologists, we tended to try and just convince everybody with logic all the time, and that's just not the best way to influence every type of person. And I think that's a hard lesson a lot of CIOs and CTOs are learning at the moment, is you can give the sort of rational, logical explanation of like A makes sense, B makes sense, therefore A plus B equals C. but it's not enough for everyone. So you need to get better at painting the picture of the glorious future. You need to get better at bridging and coming to people and finding middle ground and getting better at negotiation skills and those kind of things as well, which has not necessarily been something that you learnt along the way as you got to a CIO or a CTO role until this point. So it's an interesting challenge for us from a personal development point of view as well.
We work with a lot of fellows who are global leaders in the field, and it's truly inspirational, the work that they do. And hands down, what sets them apart from a good data scientist or a good machine learning engineer is their ability to mobilize other people to their cause. And so I think for any young career professional, my advice would be take this very seriously when you're getting started. And we also see them as well honing some of these soft skills in other areas, for example, publishing industry-based research or working on social for good projects. We see a lot of our tech leaders, our fellows, don't ask me how they find time to do it, but being able to hone these skills in other environments outside of the business, and then they come back and they have far more to add to the company. And if we could capture that in essence, in spirit, I think that would really help people to move forwards.
I mean, to the point around, Matt and Mary, you're saying, it's a really challenging role right now. And Claire, you're saying, everyone's finding time to do all of this on the side. Do you think there's kind of enough support for tech leaders right now in their roles? That's kind of open to anyone, but.
No, because I think a lot of folks at the point when you're 90% a leader and 10% a technologist, which is what many of us are in these kind of roles, reality is you aren't coding day to day. You aren't using these tools. You aren't getting the most out of them. It's very difficult to find time to experiment with them. I'm going to a 4-hour-long event this evening, which is, between Gergely Ross and O'Reilly, all about how AI is changing software engineering. And that's my evening I'm giving up to make sure that I understand what's happening, because I don't have the luxury of being able to play with it myself during the day. And I've got some responsibilities that mean that doing that out of hours is challenging as well. And so I think we absolutely need to help people get to grips with what is really possible and not just the hype, because I think it's impossible to avoid the hype, but knowing what the right tool for the right job is much more challenging and needs that investment in your own skills and knowledge.
It's interesting how the demographics of responsibility are changing as well. And if you look at which generation is driving generative AI take-up, it's certainly not at the top end. It is with Generation Z. And what's to the point that Mary said here, the traditional CIO is just not capable, but not ready or not prepared for this. And what we've seen work really well and implemented this, and that probably implemented in a lot of organizations, is reverse mentoring and using the power of that Generation Z to really help those established leaders to further develop, really. And it's just a constant development from functional leader to as we said, empowerer of human capital. And that is a huge step from a technology leader of 20, 25 years ago to now somebody who has to really think about how people behave, what mindsets people have, some of those neurolinguistics. So there's quite a lot of old skills coming back again now, which are really, really useful when implementing AI projects, which need many, many different functional streams all collaborating. And as we all know, it's compromise is the big word in all of that, and compromise to actually successfully launch an AI project is probably the key word at the moment.
There's a profoundly unhelpful stereotype as well, isn't there? That you're either a tech person or you're a business person, when in reality we're all a little bit of both to some extent or other. And we certainly see plenty of people who are masters of both. And I think the stereotype is really harmful.
I mean, from my perspective also, I mean, the tech leader doesn't necessarily on his or her own need to be the expert all the time. There has to be a trust in the organization, but how can the leader help realizing the value and help guide the organization? I think that's a super important part, that you don't always have to be that expert on everything. You have to provide that level of trust to the organization.
Yeah, I think the key word there was kind of in what you were saying, Greg, was the empowerer. You know, it's not necessarily having to be the person who does it all. It's kind of inspiring everyone and building that culture of innovation and, you know, leaning on the people who do have the right expertise in different areas. I guess that kind of was my final question really is, you know, how can tech and business leaders make sure they build that culture of innovation, and what the things you were talking about at the beginning about, you know, making sure we move from experimentation to real use cases. You know, to leave as a sort of final thought, what could people really do to make sure that that is all baked into their business? Perhaps I'll go to you, Matt, maybe to finish that off.
Yeah, I think the most important thing they can do there is start to showcase and demonstrate wins. And they don't have to be big wins right out of the gate. They can be small wins, but they have to be able to show their employees, their teams, that this technology has promise, and get them excited and engaged in utilizing it, as opposed to thinking about it as something that is a threat to their jobs or the way they do things. So it's kind of small in a sense, but I think it's a really important piece that I'll consider foundational to building the broader momentum that they need to go drive within an organization.
Is that, you know, celebrating those wins and showcasing them, does that resonate with everyone else as kind of the key to success?
Oh, for me, it definitely does. You know, those wins are super important. It doesn't have to encompass everything, but, you know, speed is always of essence. And, you know, getting those early showcases, make sure them work, make sure they're useful, and then move on to the next. I think that's a really important part to demonstrate the value.
I'd agree. I think that snowball effect is really, really important. I also think there's something about helping it be safe to experiment. Like, how do we reduce the blast radius of failure? How do we make it so that it's safe to try and safe to learn? And that, you know, failure isn't abandonment of the entire idea, which can happen a bit too easily, I think, as well.
I saw you smile there, Greg. Is that something that resonates?
I just love that term, and keep the blast radius of the failures as small as possible. I like to refer to that as fail fast and then learn from it. But certainly some parting thoughts here, and I'll quote Stephen Covey's second habit of highly successful people is keep the end in mind. And by that I mean any successful win it has to be aligned to a customer's business, and any successful win is reliant on people to deliver it.
It's about delivering the right solution to the right audience at the right time, which is not easy, but when we get it right, it kind of makes the case for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting food for thought, and an interesting note to finish on there. And I think we're going to obviously see a lot of this, you know, develop over the next few years. I'm sure we'll be back for another panel talking about similar things in the future. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much. I hope you found it as insightful as I have, and I hope it will be just as insightful to everyone who's going to be watching this. So thanks again, everyone.